The room went completely still. Not the polite quiet of a formal gathering giving way to a toast, not the anticipatory hush of a crowd waiting for music to begin. The specific charged stillness of 80 people simultaneously understanding that something wrong was happening in front of them and that they were all, for the moment, too shocked to move. Diana Ashworth, 45 years old, black diamond gown, the particular posture of a woman who had spent her life in rooms full of people who wanted things from her, had extended one finger. One perfectly manicured finger pointing downward. Toward the marble floor. Toward the feet of the woman standing before her. "On your knees," Diana said. "Kiss my shoes." In front of everyone. The woman she said it to was a maid. 27 years old, lavender uniform, white apron, a small silver name badge that said Zara. She had been working the Ashworth Estate's annual gala for 3 hours without incident, moving through the crowd with the efficient composure that the estate's household manager had noted in her personnel file as one of her most valuable professional qualities. She did not go to her knees. She crossed her arms. The room that had gone still became, somehow, stiller. Diana's expression shifted, not the shift of someone who has been challenged, because Diana Ashworth had never in her life met a challenge she expected from staff. The shift of someone who has encountered a response so completely outside the range of anticipated responses that the brain takes a moment to categorize it. "I said, I heard you," Zara said. Her voice was very quiet. It carried perfectly in the stillness. And no. One word. No raised voice. No trembling. No fear. Just the specific unhurried certainty of someone who has decided where their line is and is simply standing on the correct side of it. The man in the pink suit near the back of the room put down his champagne glass. He began to walk toward the center of the room. His name was Edward Ashworth. He was 34 years old. He was the billionaire whose engagement party this was. He was Diana's fiancé. And he was the reason Zara was in this room at all. The Ashworth Estate's annual gala was a specific kind of event that required a specific kind of staff, experienced, composed, capable of operating invisibly in a room full of people who expected invisibility from those serving them. The household manager, Mrs. Patricia Webb, had been assembling the gala team for 11 years and had developed an eye for the particular quality she needed, people who could move through wealth without being unsettled by it. She had hired Zara Osei 6 weeks earlier for the general household position, and had noted in her first week that Zara possessed the quality she looked for in an unusually complete form. She was not performing composure. She was composed. There was a difference that 11 years of management had taught Mrs. Webb to distinguish, and Zara was the latter. What Mrs. Webb did not know, what nobody in the Ashworth household knew except Edward himself, was the reason Zara Osei was in Ashworth at all. Zara Osei had not applied for the household position at the Ashworth estate because she needed the work. She had applied for it because she needed the access. Specifically, she needed access to a property dispute that had been working its way through various legal channels for 3 years, a dispute that centered on a piece of land adjacent to the Ashworth estate that had belonged to her grandmother, Abina Osei, before a series of transactions in the early 2000s that Zara had spent 18 months examining and had concluded were not what they appeared to be. Zara was 32 years old. She held a law degree from University College London and had practiced for 4 years at a firm specializing in property and inheritance law before taking a leave of absence to investigate her grandmother's case. The household position at the Ashworth estate was the most efficient way she had found to access the estate's physical records. She had found what she was looking for in week 3. She had been preparing her case quietly ever since. Diana Ashworth was not technically an Ashworth yet. She was Diana Mercer, daughter of a family whose money was old but whose circumstances had, across the previous decade, become considerably more complicated than the family name suggested. She had met Edward Ashworth at a charity event 3 years earlier and had recognized, with the specific assessment of someone whose social survival had always depended on accurate evaluation, exactly what she was looking at. She had been engaged to Edward for 7 months. The household staff, in Diana's view, existed to demonstrate this authority. Not as people with their own professional lives and personal dignity. As an audience for the exercise of a power she had not yet fully secured and was constantly anxiously performing. The incident at the gala was not the first time Diana had tested the staff. It was simply the first time the test had been administered in front of 80 people. Edward Ashworth had been at the edge of the room because he had been at the edge of the room all evening, not from social discomfort, but from the specific discomfort of the previous 3 months of observing Diana in the role she was constructing for herself and feeling that something was wrong. He had put down his champagne when Diana extended the finger. He had begun walking before Zara said no. He had heard the no by the time he reached the center of the room, and he had stopped walking because the specific quality of that single syllable, the quiet, the certainty, the complete absence of performance, had produced in him a reaction that he took an extra 3 seconds to understand. He recognized it. Not the voice. The quality. The same quality that his father had had. The quality that Edward himself tried to bring to his decisions and found, in the past 7 months, increasingly difficult to locate when Diana was in the room. Edward Ashworth had been at the edge of the room because he had been at the edge of the room all evening, not from social discomfort, but from the specific discomfort of the previous 3 months of observing Diana in the role she was constructing for herself and feeling that something was wrong. He had put down his champagne when Diana extended the finger. He had begun walking before Zara said no. He had heard the no by the time he reached the center of the room, and he had stopped walking because the specific quality of that single syllable, the quiet, the certainty, the complete absence of performance, had produced in him a reaction that he took an extra 3 seconds to understand. He recognized it. Not the voice. The quality. The same quality that his father had had. The quality that Edward himself tried to bring to his decisions and found, in the past 7 months, increasingly difficult to locate when Diana was in the room. The engagement between Edward Ashworth and Diana Mercer ended that evening. Not in a dramatic scene. Edward was not a dramatic person, and the conversation in the sitting room, which lasted 22 minutes, was conducted in the specific register of someone who has decided something and is delivering the decision rather than discussing it. Diana had 3 days to vacate her personal belongings from the Ashworth estate. Zara Osei's property case went to mediation 4 months after the gala, represented by her former firm, which had been sufficiently interested in the evidence she had assembled to take the case on a contingency basis. The Ashworth estate's legal team made a settlement recommendation to Edward within the first mediation session. Edward approved it without condition. He had read the case file himself. He had found a transaction history that was, on examination, not what it appeared to be. He had approved the settlement because it was correct to do so, and because the quality of the case that had been assembled to bring it to his attention was, he told his solicitor, the most thorough piece of property research he had encountered in 20 years of estate management. His solicitor had asked whether he knew who had assembled it. Edward had said, yes. He had said it in the specific tone that people use when they know something and are not yet deciding what to do with knowing it. 3 months after the settlement, he had called Mrs. Webb and asked her a question. Mrs. Webb had given him an answer. He had made a phone call. The phone call had been returned. Zara Osei's grandmother's land was now properly hers. The property boundary that had been incorrectly drawn in the early 2000s was formally restored. What was not documented was the conversation that had taken place, on a Tuesday afternoon in the spring, on a bench in the garden of the Ashworth estate that Edward had asked Mrs. Webb to have set with tea for 2. It lasted 2 hours. Neither of them noticed the time passing. This was noted by Mrs. Webb, who observed it from a professional distance with the specific satisfaction of someone who had spent 11 years managing a household and was watching one of the very few outcomes she considered entirely correct. She went back to her office. She made a note in no file. Some things, she had always believed, were better kept where they were, in the particular afternoon light of a garden bench, with tea, and two people who had recognized something in each other that neither of them had been looking for.